Hi, I'm John Townsend, and today we're making a wonderful little light and fluffy cookie, what they called in the 18th century a drop biscuit. Thanks for joining us today on 18th Century Cooking. Today's recipe is from the 1734 cookbook, The Compleat Housewife by Eliza Smith. And this recipe is called, in this cookbook, a drop biscuit. So today in North America, when we think of the term drop biscuit, it's something completely different. And in this context, in this little cookbook, this term, a biscuit, is a lot more like what we might refer to as a cookie or a wafer. Although biscuit still, in Great Britain, still refers to something very similar. So this recipe is very, very simple. It only has 3 ingredients, but it's not necessarily very easy. So let's get started on this. So we're gonna start out with 4 eggs, and these will work better if they're at room temperature. So if they're coming out of the refrigerator, give them time to warm up. And you're gonna wanna beat these eggs until they're nice and smooth. Now I'll add 1 cup of sugar, which will cream into our eggs. So our last ingredient is flour, 6 ounces of flour. You can use an all-purpose flour here, or if you want a little bit more lift, possibly a pastry flour or a cake flour. The recipe calls for continuing to whisk your egg and your sugar mixture together and then slowly whisking in the flour as you go. So you don't want to put this all in at once, but slowly add it. If you're concerned about gluten in this particular recipe, you can substitute rice flour, and it actually makes a little bit lighter and crispier version of the same cookie. So we've cut this recipe in half because the original recipe is rather large. It makes a bunch of these. And in the time period context, it took a lot of time and a lot of energy to bring their ovens up to temperature, and so they made larger batches of things just for efficiency's sake. And now here's where the real work begins. Like I said, this one's very simple, but it's not easy. The recipe calls for whisking this mixture for an hour by hand. If you're doing this at an historic event or at a historic site, I'm very sorry. But you know, it really makes a difference. Some very interesting things happen to this mixture if you really push it all the way into that hour. Now, if you're at home and you've got a stand mixer, well, hey, just set it on low, put this mixture in there and let it go for a whole hour because it's going to do some great things. So what's happening here is this is getting smoother and smoother, and we're trapping tiny air bubbles in this mixture. And that is the leavening for this little cookie, cake, biscuit thing. That's what makes it light and fluffy, all these little air pockets that we're putting into the egg mixture. This may be an opportunity for a relay of people to help whisk this up for your entire hour. The recipe's definitely said, make sure to keep whisking, don't stop, or it might ruin the mixture. So you wanna keep at it the whole time, you can't let it set. So as I said earlier, here in North America, we might call this a cookie. Not necessarily a biscuit like it does there. We might call it a cookie or a wafer. And the word cookie comes from the Dutch. And we see that word creeping into the American lexicon there in Amelia Simmons's 1796 cookbook, where she's using that word, that Dutch word cookie, to describe this very kind of biscuity, wafery kind of food. So after this hour of whisking, it's really taken on this very thick and silky texture. It's not runny at all, it's very thick. But this is ready to go out now and get baked. This particular recipe calls for baking these cookies or biscuits on top of a layer of flour. Now some of the similar recipes will actually call for baking these on a paper. But we found that this flour method is very interesting, that it helps insulate this biscuit from getting browned on the bottom. And the minute they start to really turn brown, they get a kind of an eggy flavor. You're gonna want about 1/8 of an inch layer of flour that you're gonna be baking on. And the nice part is that when these cookies are done, you can just brush the flour off the bottom of it so it doesn't affect the taste. You're going to want to preheat your oven to 400 degrees. You'll need to bake these approximately 5 to 6 minutes at that 400 degrees that I mentioned earlier. You really have to watch these though. In fact, she even says that in the recipe, that you have to watch these or else they will go from just right to burnt or overdone very quickly. So make sure to watch these. Depending on your oven, it might be a little bit more or less. In the time period, they've also would have baked these a second time at a lower temperature to drive off all the moisture. So that since she's making a large batch, she probably wants them to last a long time, and a soft cookie will not last long. So she wanted these completely dried out. When these biscuits come out of the oven, they're still very, very soft. So you have to leave them on this cooking sheet until they've cooled completely. And then you can pick them up and brush the flour off the bottom. Well, here are some finished ones. These have all cooled off and they're all brushed off, and let's see what they taste like. You can see that there's a little bit of coloration to them, but they're still fairly white, and they've got a nice underneath here, and they're very crispy. If you put them in, especially that second time, they get very nice and crispy. Wow. They're incredibly light and very delicate little cookie. Not like a cookie we would expect at all, really, because they're so light and fluffy. And really, there aren't any extra flavors in there, but you would think that there's possibly a lemon flavor in there. It's really interesting. Now, some of the period recipes actually call for caraway seeds to be put in these, and that might be a very interesting addition. If you want a modern version of this, put a little vanilla in there. Definitely modern though. Also a little bit of lemon oil would give you a lemon cookie, an even bigger burst of lemon flavor. These are wonderful. You really need to give this a try, especially if you've got that mixer at home so you can just set it and let it go. These are a wonderful thing, especially for the holiday season. I hope you get a chance to try them out, and I want to thank everyone out there for watching. If you're new to our channel, I want to welcome you. You can subscribe by clicking the button right up here. Also check out our related videos. Thanks so much for watching.